From the Tarzan calling for a title shot he so desperately deserves, to looking at whether Izzy has what it takes to defend his title against him, here's Sean Strickland calling out Israel Adesanya. Sean's looking to wrap some gold around his waist. It looks like Strickland's had enough of waiting in line for a shot at the top. He's grown impatient and wants his dues now. He recently faced off against Magomedov at UFC Vegas 76 and ended up taking home the win in less than 2 rounds. He completely dismantled the Russian and looked dominant from the first bell. Straight after that fight, during the post-fight conference, he called for the UFC to give him his title shot. He was swearing out the entire building, talking about how he's worked harder than everybody else and has worked his way up the rankings for a while now. Alongside tearing through the UFC roster, he's finished almost everybody who ended up on the opposite side of the octagon. He said that it's clear that the UFC is stuck in a loop with Izzy and that he's the best fighter to clear up and fix this rut they're in. He clearly believes that he's next in line to try and dethrone Israel. And honestly, that doesn't sound like the worst idea. Adesanya could use some new competition anyways. While Sean says that he should get the title shot, you have to question whether he actually deserves it. Anybody who's going to step up to the New Zealander for a title shot, well, they're going to have to be in phenomenal form. If Strickland wants a hope in hell of taking that belt home, he's going to have to be at his best. His UFC Vegas 76 fight against Magomedov is a great example of that. Sean already had him on the ropes from the first round, and you could tell that Abus was getting more and more tired. Eventually, the second round came into the picture, and Strickland ramped up the pressure even more. It wasn't long before he was able to knock Magomedov to the ground and beat him into winning by TKO. It was pretty amazing to watch, and you could see how determined Sean looked throughout the fight. The man was not playing around. He's clearly developed his in-the-ring mentality and is in the best mental space ever in his career. He also said that he knew Abus was getting weaker during the fight, and as soon as he saw his opponent's guard start to drop, he took full advantage of that opportunity. He mentioned how there's no way he plans to go home with an L on his record anytime soon. Apparently, he's gotten so into it that he's ready to die in the cage if he has to. If the man's willing to take things that far, it's pretty obvious he should get a shot at the title over someone like Whittaker, who's already lost to Izzy twice now. But when does he actually get to face the champ? So far, Dana promised the fans that the winner of Du Plessis versus Whittaker would be facing Adesanya. The thing is, the matchup isn't really a fair one. Over the last decade, Whittaker hasn't lost to anybody except Israel. So it'd be a huge stretch to assume that Dricus has what it takes to take Rob down. The Reaper is on yet another win streak, and when he starts racking up this many wins, you kinda need to call the New Zealander in to stop him in his tracks. So you have to wonder where Strickland fits into the picture. Izzy's next appearance in the octagon is going to be sometime in September, when UFC 293 takes place in Australia. The headlining fight hasn't been decided yet, but with Volk all booked up, it's pretty obvious that Adesanya is going to have the stage all to himself. Sean's come out and ranted about whether or not he should get the fight, and I'm sure that Dana heard him loud and clear. Now, it's just a question of which fight will earn the UFC head honcho more money. Will Strickland draw a bigger crowd, or the winner of Whittaker versus Du Plessis? Strickland's title shot rests on the answer to this question, so we're going to have to wait until Rob's fight is over to figure it all out. And while we're on the topic, I've got to talk about Strickland's fighting style to see if he has what it takes to win the belt. Sean has a pretty unique fighting style. Ever since he made the move to middleweight, he's been fighting with a more awkward and flat-footed style. Though it's not really a bad thing, because the longer he's fought in the division, the looser he's been able to get. Now, Sean's always been a boxer. He's basically the Max Holloway of the middleweight division. That being said, he's always been strong with his jabs. He uses them to judge distance, and thanks to how loose he's been able to get in recent times, he's able to snap his jabs, and it often catches his opponents by surprise. What they might think is a chill punch to scope out the area turns out to be a jawbreaker that often leaves them with a bloody nose. His biggest weakness? The darn lower leg kicks, and that's pretty much the same for every boxer fighting in the UFC. His solution is also pretty cool, as he often shoots for takedowns when his opponents throw kicks. This helps him score a few free points, letting him take control of his opponent on the ground. In other words, he's pretty much got things covered at every end of the spectrum. Now he's going to be facing off against one of the best strikers of all time. But one thing fans have been wanting to know is, what's Adesanya feeling these days? There was a short period of time when Izzy wasn't in the best place, and people thought he'd fallen off. This was during the time he'd lost his belt to Pereira after a really long championship run. But that wasn't enough to stop Izzy, and he vowed to come back. He ended up training his butt off and eventually beating Pereira at his own game. Alex had won by TKO, and Adesanya ended up TKOing him right back.
Declaring the winner by knockout and new undisputed
and taking back his title in the process. Since then, he's pretty much cemented his legacy as one of the best strikers in the history of the sport. He's fought everywhere. Like there was a time when he'd be fighting in China too. Throughout all that time, one thing's clear, and that's the fact that Izzy loves to counterstrike. He won't throw the first punch. He's let his opponents come to him and evade their shots, and then let loose a few jawbreakers of his own. This style of fighting has managed to get him this far, so I wouldn't start doubting it anytime soon. He also loves using leg kicks to his advantage. Back when he faced off against Paulo Costa, leg kicks had become a big part of his game plan. He also throws them like a true Thai fighter, and bruises start showing up before the first round is over. Seeing how they're Strickland's biggest weakness, this might be a problem for the challenger. Now that Izzy has an Uno reverse against Sean in his arsenal, can he manage to defend his title and add the Tarzan's name to his list of wins? Honestly, I feel like while Sean's worked super hard, he still hasn't gotten there yet. He has a small way to go, but the skill gap is still pretty obvious. I mean, Izzy's just on a whole other level when it comes to striking. Now, if Strickland decides to take a more grappling-based approach in their fight, then I can see things working out well for him. But like I mentioned before, the man's a boxer. That means he's probably going to be trying to keep the fight standing up. That'll be playing right into Adesanya's trap. Remember, Adesanya just beat Pereira, and Pereira beat Sean in the first round via knockout. You can already see how Israel is just leagues ahead of Strickland when it comes to striking. His best bet will be to take the fight to the ground and try his best to keep Izzy there. If he can manage to keep the whole fight grounded, he'll keep on scoring points. Because I've never seen Adesanya stay on his back for more than a couple of minutes in a fight, and keeping him down there will be a big challenge in itself. Besides, we don't even know if this fight will happen anytime soon. Dana still hasn't responded to any of Strickland's rants, and from the looks of things, he might just go ahead with his whole Whitaker versus Dricus plan. We're just going to have to wait and see what ends up happening. From looking at whether Adesanya has what it takes to defend his title against him, to Strickland calling for a title shot he so desperately deserves, that was Sean Strickland calling out Israel Adesanya.